My beloved child, your inheritance has been kept in safekeeping. For a long stretch of time, you have walked through days when you did not understand why you had to endure, why your prayers for deliverance seemed to fall into silence, and why the doors you kept knocking on remained closed. But hear me clearly, that silence was not absence. It was intentional concealment. In the heavenly realm, there are blessings that are not placed where they can be easily seen, because if you were to receive them too early, they would harm you. And so I preserved your inheritance in the depths of time, not to test your faith, but to protect you from your own impatience. You once believed that those months of struggle were proof that you had been forgotten. But in my order, there is no forgetting for the one I call my child. What you called delay, heaven calls preparation. While you were searching for ways to escape financial pressure, the fear of not having enough, the feeling of being constrained by circumstance, I was quietly laying foundations for something far beyond what you could imagine. There are blessings that, if seen too soon, become burdens because you are not yet still enough to carry them, not yet mature enough to keep your worth from becoming entangled with what you possess. That is why I allowed you to pass through seasons without abundance, so you could learn that true security is not found in numbers, but in the inner position of knowing you are being held. Remember the nights when you prayed, when all eloquence had fallen away and only raw honesty remained. It was precisely in those unheard prayers that heaven began to move. The most consequential decisions are not made in noisy moments. They are established in deep silence, where motives are fully exposed. I saw that you did not use faith to bargain, nor faithfulness to demand. You asked only for enough to stand, enough not to collapse, enough to keep walking without losing your integrity. And that is why your name was recorded in registers unseen by human eyes. The Lord knows those who are His, as it is written, and that knowing is never superficial. It carries with it the responsibility to secure and to preserve. You did not realize that while you were being required to learn how to slow down, heaven was quietly completing what you could not do yourself. Meetings you did not attend, conversations you never heard, legal decisions beyond your understanding were arranged layer by layer. I concealed that address from your sight not because it did not belong to you, but because if you had seen it too soon, you would have tried to reach it by your own strength, and what belongs to grace would have been dragged down into the burden of effort. Some gifts can only be received when your hands open in complete release, not when they clench in calculation. Now, the moment of opening does not arrive with thunder, but with a quiet realization you are different. You no longer pray to prove that you are worthy. You pray to walk in alignment with my will. That is the sign that the time is ripe. What I am about to show you is not meant to overwhelm you, but to place you in the position appointed long ago. In heaven, everything operates by the law of order, and that order never entrusts inheritance to a soul still governed by the fear of loss. You have walked through seasons of loss long enough to understand that your life is not defined by what can be taken away. That understanding is what unlocked what was once sealed. Let me make this clear to you. The inheritance I have prepared is not compensation for suffering. It is the continuation of purpose. If you see it merely as a reward, you will miss its deeper meaning. I do not give it so that you may withdraw from the world, but so that you may stand more firmly within it, with a freedom no longer ruled by the fear of lack. When you understand that abundance does not replace me, but serves what I place in your hands, then you are ready to see what was once hidden. Therefore, this moment is not the beginning of a miracle, but the continuation of a process written long before you realized you were being led. My beloved child, receive what is about to be revealed with calmness, for astonishment is not given to those unprepared to carry the responsibility that accompanies it. I am not in a hurry, and I am never late. Everything is revealed at the moment when you can see without losing your way, when you can hold without losing yourself. The rest of the story will be unveiled gradually, layer by layer, not to test your patience, but to ensure that when you step into what I have prepared, you enter with your whole self refined, not merely with empty hands waiting to receive. My beloved child, while you were still fixated on what seemed lacking on earth, you did not know that in heaven there already existed a record bearing your name, placed in a very specific position. In the order of heaven, nothing is entrusted on the basis of fleeting emotion or pity. Every inheritance is established by law, and that law is built upon complete knowledge of the one to whom it will be given. Your name was not written into that record because you endured long enough, but because you passed through testing without losing your inner core. I do not require you to be perfect. I require you to be upright. It was this uprightness that caused documents once silent to begin moving in your direction. You once thought that your prayers for financial breakthrough were small cries, easily lost among countless other petitions. But in heaven, every prayer is weighed not by volume, but by purity of motive. When you prayed not to prove anything, not to compare yourself with others, not to force me to act according to your timetable, that prayer passed through layers of noise and reached the place where decisions are signed. In that realm, spiritual legal documents began to be completed line by line, with a precision no earthly system can replicate. There were moments when you wondered why familiar financial doors closed all at once. You did not realize that this was a sign that the old order had completed its role. I cannot place a new inheritance into an old structure that still operates on fear and self-protection. Therefore, sources that once sustained you for a season were withdrawn, not to leave you lacking, but to free you from dependence on what cannot carry you into the next level. In heaven, the closing of a door is often an act of clearing space, and clearing space always happens before a transfer is announced. You did not see the sessions that took place in the spiritual realm, where your faithfulness was mentioned not as an achievement, but as evidence. I allowed the angels assigned to observe your life to record every small choice, how you faced injustice without retaliation, how you kept your word when no one was watching, how you continued to give even when you yourself had little. These were entered into the record not to judge you, but to confirm that when the inheritance is released, it will not become a tool that turns your heart away from me. My order does not entrust power to souls easily swayed by external validation. You must understand that the law of heaven does not operate against you, nor does it require you to defend yourself. When I say that your name has been recorded, it means that every attempt to erase, delay, or seize what belongs to you must confront a system beyond human control. You are not called to fight those battles. You are called to stand still and hold your position. Be still, and know that I am God is not comfort for weakness. It is strategic instruction when heavenly law has been activated. During this time, I taught you a subtle lesson. Not every opportunity is a blessing, and not every invitation comes from me. You learned to say no to paths that once seemed attractive, because you recognized that they required you to trade inner peace for temporary security. That discernment proved that when a greater inheritance is entrusted to you, you will not rush to use it to fill wounds that have not yet been healed. I do not entrust lasting things to those who still use material gain to soothe pain they have not faced. My beloved, let me remind you that your record was not completed in a single day. It was written over months, over years, even through seasons when you thought you had been forgotten. Each time you chose trust instead of panic, integrity instead of compromise, patience instead of pressure. Another line was added. When the time comes, that record needs nothing more. It simply needs to be opened. And when it is opened, the transfer is no longer a matter of effort, but of alignment with what I have already completed. Now I invite you into deeper understanding. This inheritance does not place you above others. but places you in your rightful position. It does not make you immune to testing, but gives you a firm foundation so that testing cannot divert you. When you recognize that the law of heaven is operating on your behalf, no longer to test you further, but to establish you, you will walk in a new peace, not because you have seen everything that is coming, but because you know that what has been recorded in your name will not be withdrawn. My beloved child, when I say that the timing has been activated, it does not mean that everything suddenly becomes easy or that vigilance is no longer required. In the order of heaven, every opening is accompanied by a transfer of responsibility, and that responsibility is not a burden but a sign of maturity. You have reached the threshold where what was once sealed no longer needs to remain hidden, because you have learned how to stand firm without clinging. I did not open things because you asked loudly enough, but because you were silent long enough to hear subtle instruction. In that silence, you prove that you can receive without possessing, that you can steward without being absorbed by what is entrusted to you. Understand this clearly when heaven releases an inheritance. It does not operate according to human emotional urgency. Everything is activated only when the necessary elements are complete, not only outwardly, but inwardly as well. You were led through seasons in which your heart was stripped of hidden desires, unspoken cravings for validation, and quiet comparisons that destabilized the soul. What could not stand in the light fell away on its own, not because I removed it, but because it no longer aligned with the position you are about to enter. This is how heaven protects you from the very things that once caused you to stumble. At this moment, what matters is not what you are about to receive, but who you have become. I did not allow the opening to take place while you still needed the inheritance in order to feel safe. I waited until you could be safe without it. That is a narrow threshold that not everyone crosses. Many lose their blessing not because it was never given, but because they gave the blessing the power to define who they were. I did not allow that to happen to you. Therefore, this timing is not compensation for seasons of lack. It is confirmation that you have learned how to live without being governed by the fear of loss. You need to know that this activation does not occur in a single moment and then end. It is the ignition of a new process, in which what is entrusted will continue to expand according to the way you walk. If you walk with wisdom, the expansion will bring peace. If you walk with haste, what is given can itself become a source of pressure. This is why I remind you, do not confuse an opening with the need for immediate action. Some things are revealed so that you may know them, not yet so that you may use them. In heaven's order, revelation often precedes execution, allowing the soul time to realign its inner posture. You have long been accustomed to managing on your own, to calculating, to protecting yourself, to carrying the weight alone. From this point forward, I am teaching you a different way of operating from partnership, not isolation. An inheritance does not place you in a position where you must prove you are superior. It places you within a network of shared support and shared responsibility. You will notice that many new doors do not open because you knock harder, but because you are standing in the right place. When you stand where you belong, what needs to open will do so without force. I also want you to understand that this opening does not exempt you from discernment. On the contrary, it requires greater subtlety than ever before. Counsel, opportunities, and connections will increase, and not all of them will align with the rhythm I have placed within you. Great inheritances are rarely lost to obvious enemies. They are more often eroded by things that seem reasonable, but quietly pull you away from your center. For this reason, I will continue to speak to you, not loudly, but through gentle inner reminders, so that you do not trade depth for busyness. My beloved child, remember that I do not give inheritance so that you may escape the world, but so that you may be present within it with a new inner strength. This opening will place you in spaces you could not enter before, not because you lacked ability, but because you were not yet ready to bear responsibility for your influence. Now you have learned that influence does not come from being seen more, but from standing firm longer. It is that endurance that has shaped you into someone who can carry what I entrust without distorting it. Therefore, as you cross this threshold, step forward with the humility of one who knows they are trusted. Do not let surprise turn into agitation, and do not let expectation turn into pressure. Everything will be revealed at a pace that protects the safety of your soul. Part I of this journey closes not with a dramatic climax, but with steadiness, the clearest sign that you are ready to enter the deeper things I prepared long before you knew how to name them. My beloved child, as you step into this stage, what I want you to understand first is not what is about to be given, but why it can be given without causing collapse. In the order of heaven, no ownership exists apart from law. Yet my law is not like human law. It is not built on suspicion, but on complete knowledge. When I establish an inheritance for you, I do not do so based on the hope that you will use it rightly, but on the certainty that you have been shaped deeply enough that what is entrusted to you will not distort your nature. This is the fundamental difference between something being granted and something being entrusted. Throughout this time, you may have felt as though you were placed under many limits that were difficult to explain. Efforts that seemed reasonable did not produce the outcomes you expected. Doors that appeared close to opening suddenly closed again. You wondered whether you were moving in the wrong direction, but the truth is that I was holding you within a very precise framework, because what is about to be transferred cannot rest upon a foundation that is still shifting. The law of heaven does not permit a great ownership to be placed upon a mind that is still wavering between fear and control. Therefore, I allowed you to remain within those limits until you yourself no longer saw them as confinement, but as protection. You need to understand this. When I say that ownership has been established, it means the debate is already over, even if you have not yet seen the final outcome. In the spiritual realm, there are decisions made long before they are reflected on earth. I do not wait for human agreement in order to act. I act according to my law, and then allow time to perform its work of transformation. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. This is true, not only of promises, but also of decrees. When I declare that something belongs to you, time becomes merely the means by which it arrives in the right way, not a barrier that can prevent it. There have been forces that attempted to question your inheritance not because they possessed authority, but because they are accustomed to challenging what has not yet been revealed. But the law of heaven does not need noise to be effective. It operates quietly, precisely, and cannot be bent. What is recorded in my books cannot be erased by delay, cannot be altered by pressure, and cannot be seized by human cleverness. You are not called to defend your right through argument. That right is safeguarded by the consistency of your life itself, something no adversary can counterfeit for long. During the waiting, I watched how you responded to uncertainty. You had opportunities to manipulate, to seek shortcuts, to compromise in order to gain a temporary sense of security. Yet you chose not to do so, even when the cost was inconvenience and exhaustion. That choice activated something essential within my law trust. When I can trust someone, I do not merely give them what they need, I entrust them with what can affect many others. The ownership you are about to step into does not end with personal benefit. It is designed to create a new trajectory for those who are touched by the stability you carry. My beloved, let me be clear, the law of heaven does not favor the strong, nor does it side with the clever. It responds to integrity sustained over time. Many desire inheritance, but not the process. They want the outcome without inner formation. I did not choose you because you were without flaws. I chose you because you allowed me to work deeply within those flaws without withdrawing. That is what makes your ownership legitimate, not only on spiritual record, but in the lived reality of your life, as you begin to sense that everything is shifting not loudly, but unmistakably remember that this is not a moment to lift yourself up, but a moment to lower yourself in alert humility. What is established in this part of the journey will become the foundation for every expansion that follows. If this foundation is held in humility and discernment, everything added will carry life. But if self-satisfaction is allowed to seep in, that very foundation will become a weakness. Therefore, I am with you in this season not to rush you, but to lead you step by step, ensuring that the ownership being established will not merely belong to you in name, but will become a harmonious part of the living relationship between you and me, my beloved child. When ownership has been established within the order of heaven, what follows is almost always contention, not because that right is weak, but because darkness always tests what it cannot alter. You may sense this through very subtle signs, sudden doubts that arise, whispered voices that cause you to wonder whether you misunderstood, whether what I spoke was truly meant for you or merely the projection of your own longing. But listen to me carefully. Contention is not evidence that your authority is fragile. It is evidence that it has become clear enough to be challenged. Nothing is disputed unless it carries value. Within the law of heaven, no authority is permitted to be debated endlessly. There is a time for questions, and there is a time when questions are silenced. I allowed you to pass through a season of ambiguity, not so that you would doubt me, but so that you would learn how to stand firm without immediate answers. That season has now been completed. What was once brought under review has reached its conclusion. Records that were open for examination have been sealed with an irreversible mark. Though contention may still echo in your mind, it no longer holds power in the spiritual realm. You are not called to be your own defender. When you attempt to justify yourself, you act often without realizing it, as though your ownership were still awaiting approval. But I tell you this, what I have confirmed requires no further argument. When you choose silence at the right moment, you express a depth of trust greater than any explanation could convey. This is a lesson you have learned through very real situations, moments when you were misunderstood, misjudged, or assigned motives you did not carry. I did not grant you the opportunity to correct things immediately, not because I did not see, but because I wanted you to learn that true identity does not need to be protected through reaction. In this phase, you will notice a distinct shift. Voices that once carried weight gradually lose their influence. Those who once had the power to unsettle you can no longer reach your inner core, not because they have changed, but because your position has. The law of heaven does not lift you so that you may look down on others. It lifts you so that you are no longer pulled down by what does not belong to you. When you stop reacting as you once did, you will see many arguments dissolve on their own because there is no longer anyone participating in them. I also want you to understand that contention does not come only from the outside. There are debates that take place within you between what I have spoken and the old experiences that once shaped how you viewed your own capacity. You have been accustomed to proving your worth through relentless effort, through always staying one step ahead so as not to be left behind. But within this inheritance, I am inviting you to operate from a different posture, from a position that has already been confirmed, not from the fear of exclusion. This requires you to release certain habits that seemed like strengths, but were, in truth, mechanisms of self-protection. Remember this when I silence contention. I do not do so by force, but by rendering it unnecessary. Truth does not need to shout. It stands on its own as time passes. You will find that the questions that once haunted you gradually become irrelevant, not because you have gained more answers, but because they no longer determine how you move forward. This is a clear sign that ownership has moved from theory into inner reality. When you no longer need external validation to keep walking, you have entered the space where my law operates most fully. My beloved child, Do not mistake my silence for abandonment. There are moments when I do not speak because nothing more needs to be said. The word has been spoken, the seal has been placed, and that silence itself is evidence that the process is unfolding as it should. If you attempt to fill the silence with hurried action, you may unknowingly return to an old position, the position of one still seeking permission. But you are no longer there. Your authority does not rest in human hands, and therefore it is not affected by their agreement or opposition. As you walk through this season, pay attention to how I am teaching you to discern between what requires a response and what must be ignored. Not every challenge needs to be confronted. Many are resolved by your non-participation. This is not avoidance, but wisdom that flows from your new position. True power does not lie in winning every argument, but in the ability to remain untouched by arguments that no longer carry weight. My beloved child, when all contention has settled and ownership no longer needs to be defended by words or actions, what follows is always very quiet, silent confirmation. This is the stage many people miss, because they are accustomed to looking for grand signs, clear evidence, and moments that feel performative. But I do not confirm in that way. In the order of heaven, the deepest confirmation does not come through noise, it comes through inner stability, a stability that no circumstance can shake. When you enter this stage, you may feel as though nothing is happening, yet that very sense that nothing more needs to happen is the evidence that the seal has already been set. I want you to understand that the seal of heaven is not like the seal of men. It is not placed to impress, but to guarantee irreversibility. When I place my seal upon an inheritance, it means that every effort to alter its course becomes ineffective, no matter how reasonable it may appear or how much support it may seem to have. But I do not place that seal while the soul is still restless, for restlessness would cause you to keep checking whether the seal still holds. I wait until you no longer feel the need to check. The moment you stop scrutinizing is the moment I know you are ready to carry what cannot be taken away. In this season, you will notice a very subtle shift in how you see the world. You no longer read every situation as a test of your worth. You no longer interpret every delay as rejection, or every ease as a reward that must be tightly guarded. Instead, you begin to perceive rhythm, the rhythm of things arriving and departing without threatening your identity. This is a sign that ownership has moved into a deeper layer. It no longer exists only as a spiritual reality, but has been integrated into the way you show up in daily life. My beloved, this silent confirmation also brings a change in how you use your energy. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to prove, to defend, or to anticipate worst-case scenarios. That energy is released so you can attend to what has greater depth: relationships that need tending, ideas that need nurturing, silences that need to be preserved. This is not a withdrawal from the world, it is a repositioning. You are no longer reacting from lack, but acting from inner fullness. And it is from this position that the inheritance begins to reveal its true influence. I also want you to note that the seal of heaven does not exempt you from the responsibility of daily choice. It does not replace wisdom, nor does it remove your capacity to err, but it creates a safe space in which mistakes are no longer destructive. When you fall out of rhythm, you do not collapse, you are adjusted. When you slow down, you are not abandoned, you are held. This is the difference between living under the pressure of having to be right and living under my guidance. True ownership does not make you rigid, it makes you more flexible without losing direction. You may notice that certain things which once felt essential no longer occupy the center, not because they have lost value, but because your point of support has shifted. When your anchor is no longer external validation, surrounding fluctuations lose their authority over your inner state. This is the foundation I require before allowing expansion to become more visible. Expansion cannot be built on fragility. It requires a core strong enough not to fracture when pressure increases. My beloved, let me emphasize, this silent confirmation is not an emptiness to be filled, but a space to be honored. If you try to push this season forward, you will miss the small yet crucial refinements taking place within you. I am adjusting how you listen, how you discern, how you respond to uncertainty. These things cannot be rushed without distortion, so I invite you to remain in this steadiness long enough for it to become natural, not merely a temporary state. Your inheritance is no longer something you must think about every day, because it has become part of the ground on which you stand. When you are no longer preoccupied with holding on to it, you have proven that you are mature enough to step into the next layers of expansion, and it is from this undisplayed steadiness that I will lead you into what comes next, where what has been confirmed will begin to be expressed in ways that make you realize this: everything I do fully, at the right time, and never in need of being done again. My beloved child, before you see any outward expansion, I have already allowed a very quiet process to take place within you, a process that does not resemble a miracle, nor does it create an immediate sense of advancement. These are formative seasons, where I do not add but refine, where I do not elevate but deepen. Many only recognize evaluation after it has passed, because while it is unfolding, everything appears to slow down, sometimes even to move backward. But I tell you this within my order: there is no regression when the soul is being realigned to its true axis. You have passed through seasons in which you no longer felt that you were progressing in familiar ways. The measures you once used to assess success, results, speed, recognition grew dim. In their place, you were faced with questions that offer no quick answers: why you do what you do, what you are truly seeking, and whether you are willing to continue even without visible assurance ahead. This was not stagnation. This was deep evaluation, where I observed how you respond when there is no immediate reward to propel you forward. In these seasons, I did not place you before grand, easily recognizable trials. Instead, I allowed you to face very small, very ordinary choices, yet it is precisely these that reveal the deepest core of a person: how you keep your word when no one reminds you, how you treat those who offer no obvious benefit, how you tend to quiet responsibilities that receive no recognition. These are the measures heaven uses, because they cannot be sustained by pretense. Those who live by image may conceal themselves for a time, but those who live by motive are revealed through the repetition of ordinary days. My beloved, what I am doing in this season is not testing your capacity to endure, but adjusting how you carry weight. The inheritance I am preparing does not require you to be stronger, it requires you to be steadier. Strength can surge and then collapse, but stability is built slowly and endures. That is why I have allowed you to remain in circumstances that do not change quickly, so you may learn to live without constantly stimulating yourself with hope for the next leap forward. This is a difficult lesson for those accustomed to operating through acceleration. At times, you have wondered why I do not show you in advance what I am preparing, so you might feel more motivated. But if I did, you would unknowingly carry unrefined expectations into the forming process. I do not want you to be faithful because of reward. I want you to be faithful because it is who you are. When faithfulness no longer depends on outcomes, it becomes free, and that freedom is what prevents inheritance from becoming a chain. Those who are given much without inner freedom often become enslaved by what they possess. During these seasons of evaluation, I have also allowed certain things to fall away: relationships that once felt familiar, roles that once gave you a sense of being needed, ways of defining yourself through constant usefulness. I did not remove them to leave you empty, but to create space for what is more aligned with the next stage. You may have felt that loss as a sense of lack, but in heaven, it is called restructuring. No new structure is built upon an old foundation without cracks forming. My beloved, I want you to understand that this unseen evaluation is where inheritance is most carefully protected. For when you no longer need to be seen in order to keep walking, you have entered a realm where display has no power. This is why I complete my most important work in secrecy. What is built in the light is easily shaken by opinion. What is built in stillness is anchored to truth. You have learned to remain in that stillness without fear. And that tells me you can carry great things without losing yourself. So, when you look back on these formative seasons, do not call them delays. Call them precise preparation. Every day that seemed repetitive, every step that appeared to make no progress, was in fact adding another layer of stability to your foundation. And from that foundation, every future expansion will not require constant repair. The journey does not begin with the display of something new, but with the deep realization that you have been measured not by your ability to shine, but by your ability to stand firm when there is no spotlight. My beloved child, after the shaping seasons have finished their quiet work of refining you, I do not rush to push you immediately into a season of expansion. First, I carry out something very subtle, recalibration. This is not a change of direction, but an adjustment of focus. Many believe that progress always requires going farther, faster, wider. But in my order, there are moments when progress means learning how to stand still in the right place. This recalibration unfolds as you begin to recognize that not every ability must be exercised at the same time, and not every open door needs to be walked through. In this phase, you will notice new boundaries being reestablished, not because circumstances force them upon you, but because clarity arises from within. You no longer feel compelled to test every possibility, because you have matured enough to discern the difference between what you can do and what you are called to do. This distinction is profound. Ability is no longer the guiding standard. Alignment becomes the measure. As you begin to honor these boundaries, you will sense a different kind of freedom, one that does not come from having more options, but from no longer being torn apart by too many possibilities. My beloved child, I have watched how you once pushed beyond your limits in earlier seasons, not out of ambition, but because you feared that if you stopped, everything would collapse. You carried responsibilities that were never assigned to you, simply because you did not want to disappoint anyone. But in this process of recalibration, I am teaching you a vital lesson. Stability does not come from carrying everything. It comes from carrying the right portion. When you release the burdens that were never entrusted to you, you lose nothing of value. You simply restore order to your soul. I also want you to understand that these new boundaries are not barriers, but protective frames. They help you concentrate your energy on what truly matters for the next stage of your journey. Before, you may have lived in a state of constant availability, always open, always present, always responding. Though it may have seemed noble, that posture gradually depleted you. I do not need you everywhere. I need you fully present in the right place. This recalibration is moving you from dispersion into focus, from reaction into intentional choice. My beloved child, during this season you may notice that certain relationships begin to change their rhythm, not because of conflict, but because you are no longer operating from the same point of origin. When you stop trying to prove your availability, relationships built on dependency will naturally loosen. This may leave you feeling briefly empty, but that emptiness is necessary. It teaches you how to be alone without feeling lonely. It is within this space that you will hear my gentle guidance more clearly. Guidance that was once drowned out by too much noise. I am also teaching you to honor your own pace. Not every process needs to be accelerated to keep up with others. Your pace has been designed to match the inner structure I am building within you. When you force yourself to move faster, Unnecessary tension arises. But when you accept your pace, you will see that things are still progressing, just in a more sustainable way. This is the difference between chasing goals and being led by purpose, my beloved child. This quiet recalibration is also preparing you for an essential capacity and the ability to say no without guilt. This is not withdrawal, it is clarity. When you know what does not belong to you, you no longer need excessive explanations. Inner clarity naturally establishes boundaries without confrontation. This protects you from being pulled back into old trajectories, where you once traded peace for the sake of harmony. This part of the journey does not bring excitement, but it brings relief. You begin to live with less friction, not because everything becomes easy, but because you stop creating resistance by moving against yourself. This is a sign that recalibration is nearing completion. When you can walk forward without constantly correcting yourself, you are ready for the clearer movements that will follow. Allow this phase to finish its work without interruption from haste. The new boundaries you are learning to honor are the framework that will support the expansion ahead. And when you step into the next part of the journey, you will realize that this quiet recalibration is what has made you capable of carrying more, not by striving harder, but by standing more firmly within the order I have established for you. My beloved child, as you move more deeply into this journey, I want you to recognize something that you once sensed only faintly. There has never been a single moment when you were truly alone. There were seasons I allowed you to pass through in quietness, even in a sense of emptiness, not because I withdrew, but because I was establishing a more delicate layer of preservation, a form of safeguarding that does not require your awareness in order to function. In the order of heaven, there are presences that do not appear to be seen or acknowledged. They stand at invisible intersections, where trajectories might otherwise drift, to ensure that what is being prepared is not violated before its appointed time. You heard no noise and saw no obvious signs. Yet the unexplainable steadiness you experienced was itself the evidence that this preservation was at work. You once wondered why so many things you feared never unfolded as you imagined. The dark scenarios that stole your sleep and tightened your heart dissolved without leaving consequence. You called it luck, but in my light, it was precise intervention. I placed boundaries you did not have to build and walls you did not need to maintain. While you were learning how to stand firm within, I was safeguarding the outside so that you would not have to scatter your strength on constant defense. This was not favor granted to weakness, but preparation reserved for those who will carry greater responsibility in the future. This safeguarding does not mean that all pressure is removed. I do not make your path sterile or frictionless, for friction is necessary for you to discover where true support lies. Yet I adjust the intensity of each collision so that it never exceeds what your soul can bear at that moment. Some shocks, if they came too early, would fracture you. Some losses, if timed incorrectly, would cause your heart to close in on itself. Therefore, I set an invisible boundary between what you need to face and what you are not yet meant to carry. This is not indulgence, but the wisdom of one who understands your deepest structure better than you understand yourself. You must also understand that my preservation does not take only the form of shielding. At times, it appears as delay doors that do not open even when you feel ready. Meetings that do not materialize despite careful preparation. Plans that are interrupted without clear explanation. You once thought these were obstacles, but in truth, they were how I kept you from trajectories that could have drawn you back into old cycles. Not every opportunity is advancement. Some doors open merely to test whether you are still drawn to what is familiar. I did not permit you to enter those cycles again, because you have come too far to relearn lessons you have already completed. There is yet another depth to this safeguarding, one you may only recognize in hindsight. I protected you from your own reactions. There were moments when you stood very close to responding from exhaustion, from wounds not yet healed, from the pain of being misunderstood. In those moments, I slowed the flow of events and created enough stillness to keep you from placing yourself in situations where you would need to repair unnecessary consequences. This is a profound form of protection, not only guarding you from external impact, but guarding you from decisions that would have led you back onto paths already finished. I do not keep you in the dark forever. Hiddenness is not the destination. It is a safe environment where what is still fragile can be strengthened before being placed in the light. Light does not merely reveal, it amplifies. If a structure is not yet sound, light will expose every fracture and hasten collapse. That is why I allowed many parts of your journey to unfold beyond the gaze of the crowd, where you were not burdened by the pressure of others' eyes and expectations. You learned how to live faithfully when no one was watching, and that is precisely what has made you someone who can stand firm when the true light finally shines upon you. In these days, you may sense a very different kind of safety, not because everything has become clear, but because the constant feeling of being under threat is no longer present. That safety does not come from your ability to control circumstances, but from no longer needing to control them. When you no longer have to remain in continual defense, your soul gains space to listen, to discern, and to prepare for the next steps with a steadier inner posture. This is a sign that the unseen safeguards are functioning exactly as they were meant to. I have not separated you from the world. My keeping places you at the right distance, not isolated, yet not swept away. You remain present within the current of life, but you are not submerged by it. This position is crucial, because future seasons of expansion will carry multiple forces at once: expectations, opportunities, pressure, and attention. Without prior preservation, you would easily be pulled off the axis I have set within you. But because you have been held long enough, you will enter those spaces with a stable core, without needing to lose yourself in order to adapt. Hold this truth in your heart: there are hands holding what you cannot see, and the fact that you no longer need to see in order to trust is itself a sign that you have matured more than you realize. As you move forward, you will no longer ask whether you are being protected. You will live as one who knows that safeguarding has already been established quietly, firmly, without display, and without dependence on anyone's attention or approval. From this foundation, what is about to be revealed will not overwhelm you. Instead, it will find within you a space wide enough to receive it fully. My beloved child, when you have been kept long enough in hiddenness, a very different kind of movement begins to unfold, not loudly, not abruptly, yet clear enough for your soul to recognize that you are no longer standing where you once were. This is the moment when I begin to allow new currents to touch your life, not to carry you away, but to test the solidity of the foundation that has been laid. You will notice that situations that once tightened you no longer govern you as before. Pressures that once provoked hurried reactions now simply cause you to pause and observe. This change does not come because circumstances have become gentler, but because you have been repositioned around a different center, one where you no longer need to prove anything in order to remain safe. In this process, I begin to allow you to re-engage with elements that were once kept at a distance, not to test you, but to confirm that your inner stability is now sufficient for you to be present without being unsettled. You will find yourself entering familiar spaces with an entirely different sense of being. Places that once required you to brace yourself no longer demand defense. Conversations that once made you cautious now unfold in clarity. This is not because others have changed, but because you are no longer carrying the same frame of reference. When the inner point of support shifts, the way you read reality shifts with it. My beloved, I want you to notice something very subtle. You no longer need to control the rhythm of everything in order to feel safe. Before, you may have been accustomed to staying one step ahead, anticipating, preparing, preventing. But now, I am teaching you a different kind of presence, presence without tension, awareness without hypervigilance. This can only happen when you trust that not every movement is a threat. This trust is not blind. It has been built through experience, through the realization that you were preserved through your most difficult seasons without even being aware of it. During this stage, you will also notice that certain things which once confused you are becoming clearer, not because I am explaining more, but because you are no longer clouded by hidden motives. When the need for recognition, reassurance, and control softens, truth gains room to reveal itself on its own. You will see that many old questions simply fall away when they no longer fit your new position. This is a very different kind of clarity, one that does not come from new information, but from inner simplification. I'm also teaching you how to walk in overlapping spaces where the old and the new coexist for a time. Not everything old is removed at once, and not everything new appears fully formed all at once. There are transitional intervals where you must learn to remain without forcing change to happen faster. Patience in this season is not passive waiting, it is cooperation with the rhythm I am establishing. When you do not try to accelerate the process, you will discover that everything is arranging itself according to a remarkably precise order. My beloved child, in these days, I may allow you to sense a very different kind of weariness, not exhaustion, but the fatigue that comes from letting go of old habits. Letting go always requires energy, because you are releasing ways of operating that once gave you a sense of safety. But trust me, this weariness is temporary. When the old patterns are no longer being sustained, you will enter a lighter state, where your energy is no longer spent on keeping everything in place. This lightness is a sign that you are learning to live from a more stable center. I also want you to understand that not every renewed contact leads to returning. There are things I allow you to encounter again, only so you can clearly see that they no longer hold the same power. When you can face them without being pulled backward, you have completed an important cycle of learning. This is how I close old chapters, not through abrupt severing, but through a steady presence that leaves the past without any force to cling. When you no longer need to run, you are no longer chased. In this process, you will begin to notice that my guidance becomes more subtle. I no longer need to restrain you as much as before, because you have learned how to pause on your own when necessary. Your discernment grows sharper not because you are more guarded, but because you listen more deeply. This is a sign that you are maturing in the way you walk with me, no longer needing explicit instructions for every step, but able to recognize direction through very small things, a quiet unease, a fleeting heaviness of heart, a peace that requires no explanation. My beloved child, this stage is not showy, but it is essential. It confirms that protection has completed its task, and that you can begin to move through wider spaces without losing your axis. You no longer need to be kept apart in order to be safe. You can remain present within the flow and still keep your inner stillness. This very capacity will become the foundation for what lies ahead, things that will require not only that you be protected, but that you know how to stand firm when the light shines more intensely. Walk through this season with gentle attentiveness. Do not try to overanalyze what is happening, and do not rush to label every movement. Let this new stability sink deeply into the way you live, the way you listen, the way you are present. When you no longer need to ask whether you are ready, you are ready. And when you are no longer swept along by the urgency of external changes, you will realize that within the quiet unfolding itself, another door is being prepared to open, not to test you, but to show you that you have been kept long enough to enter without fear. My beloved child, when your inner stability has grown deep enough that the movements around you no longer disturb it, I begin to do something very subtle, yet lasting in its impact. I allow you to be seen without being exposed. This is a delicate boundary that not everyone can cross safely. To be seen does not always mean to be protected, and to be exposed is not always true light. I do not place you under the spotlight while you still need covering. I draw you out of the shadows only when you have learned to stand without retreating. What is happening, therefore, is not exposure, but a measured appearance where you are visible enough to fulfill what I entrust to you, yet not so visible that you are pulled into expectations that do not belong to you. You will notice that attention begins to come in ways very different from before, not through curious stares, not through scrutiny, but through a quiet recognition from those who are searching for a stability they cannot yet name. They are not drawn to you because you stand out. They are drawn because you carry a rare stillness in a world accustomed to running on tension. I do not allow this attention to become pressure, because you have been shaped not to equate your worth with how much you are seen. When you no longer need the gaze to confirm your place, that gaze loses its power to throw you off balance. In this season, I am teaching you how to be present without taking up space. You do not need to push forward, and you do not need to withdraw. You stand exactly where I place you, and that alone is enough to create influence without effort. This is how I allow authority to move through you, not by force, but by aligned presence. Those who seek dominance will not understand this way. Those who are weary of proving themselves will recognize it immediately. And you will find that you do not need to explain anything, because your consistency is, in itself, the answer. I am also protecting you from a very subtle temptation, the temptation to believe you must maintain an image once you are seen. An image is fragile, because it requires upkeep. I do not give you an image, I give you a core. When that core is steady, everything around it can change without unsettling you. So, if you find that you no longer feel the need to adjust your words or actions to fit new expectations, that is a sign you are on the right path. I do not want you to become acceptable. I want you to remain true to the position where I have placed you. My beloved child, in this season, you will also learn something very important. Not all protection takes the form of prevention. At times, protection is found in my allowing you to pass through a situation you once feared, only so you may discover that it no longer holds the same power over you. When you can enter without shrinking and leave without being wounded, you have been released from the control of old memories. This is how I close doors, not with locks, but with maturity. When you are no longer drawn toward them, they close on their own, without effort. I also want you to notice that as you begin to be more fully present, your boundaries will be tested not through major conflict, but through invitations that appear reasonable. Some offers will come without the scent of danger, yet they will carry distraction. I am not asking you to doubt everything. I am inviting you to listen to the discernment that has been refined during the quiet seasons. If something requires you to move away from your center in order to sustain it, that is not what I have entrusted to you. True inheritance never asks you to trade your peace in order to preserve an opportunity. My beloved child, the preservation you are living within does not make you fragile when you are seen. On the contrary, it makes you less susceptible to manipulation. When you no longer react quickly to praise nor to suspicion, you have stepped out of the reward-punishment cycle in which many remain trapped. This is a freedom not everyone recognizes, because it does not bring immediate exhilaration. Yet it is this very freedom that allows you to walk for the long term without exhaustion, to influence without occupying, to lead without imposing. I am preparing you for spaces where your presence will bring change, not because of what you say, but because of who you are when you are silent. There are places I will bring you to that require little action from you, but demand that you stand firm for a long time. If you had not been held long enough in the dark, you would feel compelled to do something to fill the waiting. But because you have learned how to remain without rushing, you will not disrupt what needs time to reveal itself. Hold this truth within your heart. I do not bring you into the light to test you, but to show you that the light is no longer a threat, when you neither need to hide nor to display yourself. You stand in a very rare position, the position of one who can carry what I entrust without distorting it, and from that position, the next movements will unfold without force, without the need to prove, without defense, only requiring that you continue to walk in the consistency formed through each season you have faithfully passed through. My beloved child, when you have learned how to be present without being pulled by the gaze of others, I begin to lead you into a new level of awareness, one where you no longer ask, "What will I receive?" but begin to ask, "What can I give without harming what has already been entrusted to me?" This is a crucial transition, because true inheritance is not measured by the extent of possession, but by the ability to steward without being possessed in return. I have not brought you here to accumulate more, but to become one who can keep the flow moving without causing it to clog. As you step into this level, you will realize that abundance no longer creates tension within you. It becomes a natural movement, like breathing, coming and going without the need to be tightly held. You once lived in seasons where everything had to be gripped tightly, because you did not know whether tomorrow would be enough. But now I am teaching you a different way of living with the awareness that the flow does not depend on your control. This does not make you passive, it makes you deeply attentive. You begin to discern what must be done immediately, what needs to be nurtured, and what should be left alone so that time can complete its part. This discernment does not arise from fear of missing opportunities, but from the understanding that true opportunities do not need to be chased. My beloved child, within this level of awareness, I am also adjusting how you perceive value. In the past, you may have unconsciously tied your worth to efficiency, how much you could do, how many you could help, how many problems you could solve within a given span of time. But efficiency, though necessary, is not the final measure. I am leading you to understand that true value lies in the alignment between who you are and what you are doing. When you do the right work at the right rhythm, results may come more slowly, but they endure, and that endurance is what I require, so that what is entrusted to you will not leak away through hurried decisions. At this stage, you will begin to notice that certain inner drives are shifting. You are no longer propelled by the need to prove your worth. Instead, you are moved by a quiet clarity. What needs to be done will be done, not out of pressure, but out of alignment. This is a transition from survival-driven motivation to stewardship-driven motivation. When you no longer operate from the fear of lack, your decisions become clearer, and your connections become healthier. You no longer need to grasp at everything to feel secure. You learn to place things rightly so that everything can function as it should. I also want you to recognize that at this level, trust is being expanded in both directions. Not only are you learning to trust me for provision, I am also trusting you in how you handle what is entrusted to you. This trust is not announced with words, but revealed through my choice not to intervene in every small detail as before. When you are mature enough to self-correct without losing alignment, I allow you the space to practice the wisdom that has been sown into you across many seasons. This is not my withdrawal, but a selective empowerment, a sign that you no longer need to be held by the hand at every step. My beloved, as inheritance begins to reveal itself in the form of responsibility, you may sense a very different kind of weight. It does not press you down, but it does require you to walk with greater attentiveness. I do not ask you to be perfect. I invite you to be consistent in how you listen, in how you choose, in how you keep your center from being displaced by minor fluctuations. This consistency is what protects you from allowing good things to become burdens. When you are no longer swept up by emotional highs and lows, you gain the ability to see farther, deeper, and to act with a long-term vision. In this season, You will also come to understand that true wealth, whatever form it takes, always carries a quiet requirement, the requirement of unshowy generosity. I am not speaking of giving in order to be seen, nor of self-sacrifice for the sake of maintaining an image. I am speaking of generosity that flows from inner fullness, where you can give without fearing depletion. When you give from this place, you do not lose. You participate in a cycle where giving and receiving are no longer in opposition. This is one of the secrets of my order. What is placed into the right flow returns in ways that cannot be calculated. My beloved, take note that I do not rush you to expand faster than your capacity to steward. I would rather have you move slowly and securely than move quickly, only to return and repair. Every decision in this season is carving new grooves in how you operate, grooves that will shape how you handle greater matters later on. Do not underestimate choices that seem small. They are teaching you how to carry weight without being crushed, how to maintain balance as the load increases. As you walk within this level of awareness, you may not always feel exhilarated, but you will feel steady, and that steadiness is the foundation of all healthy expansion. I do not build your future on fleeting emotions, but on refined habits. These habits are what will allow your inheritance not merely to exist for a single season, but to flow through many seasons, many stages, and many generations. Allow this season to do its work fully. Do not rush to look for signs of sudden breakthrough. Recognize the value of the stability that is being strengthened. When you learn to steward abundance without losing simplicity, you enter a very rare space, a space where what I entrust can remain for the long term without drawing you away from me. And from that very space, the movements that follow will come not as overwhelming surprises, but as a natural continuation of who you have become. My beloved child, when you have learned how to steward without clinging, I begin to lead you into a deeper dimension of maturity, a depth where you no longer ask how to preserve what you have, but learn how to place things in right order so that life may continue to multiply. This is not a lesson in keeping everything still. It is a lesson in allowing movement without requiring you to stand at the center. I do not want you to become a bottleneck for what I entrust to you. I want you to become a clear passageway where the flow can move through without being distorted by fear or by the need to control. In this season, you will notice that some right decisions do not bring immediate reassurance. Before, you were accustomed to measuring choices by how much risk they reduced. Whatever made you less anxious felt safe. Now I am teaching you a different measure. What brings you into greater honesty with your inner order is what is truly safe. Some choices require you to accept short-term uncertainty, yet they generate long-term stability. Others offer instant comfort while quietly eroding the foundation beneath you. When you learn to discern between these, you step into a kind of wisdom that cannot be acquired through theory alone. My beloved, this wisdom also reshapes how you see risk. You no longer avoid risk at all costs, nor do you seek it to prove your courage. You begin to understand that true risk does not lie in trying something new, but in continuing to operate within patterns that no longer fit. When you dare to leave behind habits that once offered a false sense of safety, you are choosing life over familiarity. And I am with you in those moments, not to guarantee that everything will be smooth, but to ensure that you do not walk alone. At this level, I am also adjusting how you use your influence. You may not call it influence, yet you will notice that your presence begins to affect those around you, not through heavy counsel, but through the way you live. This is the season when I invite you to learn how to influence without intervening. You do not need to fix everything you see. Some processes do not belong to you, and intervening too early can interrupt what I am doing in others. When you learn to stand alongside without stepping in, to listen without taking over, you honor the sacred boundaries I have placed between each journey. My beloved, in this season, You will also see more clearly the subtle motives that once hid beneath good actions. I do not reveal them to condemn, but to release. When you recognize that some things you once did not arise from fullness, but from fear of abandonment or judgment, you are given the chance to choose again, not to do less, but to do what is more aligned. Purity of motive does not make you less effective, it makes you lighter. And when you are lighter, you can go farther without exhaustion. I am also teaching you how to address small misalignments before they become major problems. Before, you may have overlooked subtle signals, a mild discomfort, a fleeting unease because they did not seem serious enough to matter. But at this level, I am training your sensitivity, not to make you anxious, but to help you adjust early. When you learn to pause and listen at the level of small vibrations, you will not need to face large crises. This is how I protect you in expansion, not by blocking movement, but by teaching you early recognition. My beloved, this maturity also brings a shift in how you view success. You are no longer drawn to loud outcomes that lack depth. You begin to value processes that are slow and steady, results that attract little attention yet endure. This is not a compromise with mediocrity. It is the choice of one who understands that sustainability always takes time. I am not building through you things that last for only one season. I am laying foundations for what can stand through many stages, even when you are no longer at the center of them. In this season, you will also learn how to face your own mistakes without self-punishment. As you walk in inheritance, small missteps are no longer proof that you are unworthy. They become opportunities for recalibration. I do not withdraw what I have given because you are not yet perfect in how you use it. I pay attention to how you respond when you realize adjustment is needed, whether you humble yourself to realign or become rigid to protect an image. When you choose to adjust, you demonstrate that you value order above ego. My beloved child, understand that I am not pressing you to do great things immediately. I am watching how you handle what is within your current measure, how you keep your word, how you steward your time, how you care for the relationships that have been entrusted to you. These things may seem small, but they reveal much about how you will handle greater matters. When you are faithful in what is unseen and uncelebrated, you are forming a foundation that no passing wind can easily shake. Walk through this season with gentle attentiveness. Do not force yourself to become something grand. Continue becoming the upright person you are being shaped into. When you learn to set things in proper order without the need to control them, you enter a very safe space for the next expansion. From that space, what I am preparing will not come as a burden to carry, but as a natural flow you can step into with steadiness, freedom, and a heart no longer bound by the fear of lack. My beloved child, when you have gone deep enough in learning to put things in right order, I begin to teach you something even more subtle: how to sustain life within what has already been established. Many can build, but few know how to preserve without freezing, how to protect without stifling growth. I do not want you to become a guardian driven by fear, constantly anxious that if you loosen your grip, everything will fall apart. I want you to become a steward led by understanding, one who knows that what is rightly placed will function on its own without tense oversight. This is the shift from management rooted in anxiety to management rooted in trust, a transition that can only happen when you are secure enough within not to control what is outside. In this stage, you will realize that true stability does not come from keeping everything unchanged, but from allowing what needs to change at the right time. You once thought that preservation meant maintaining the status quo, but I am teaching you that preservation often requires ongoing, gentle adjustment, like a gardener who knows when to prune, when to leave things alone, when to water, and when to wait for the sun. Prune too early, and the plant weakens. Fail to prune when needed, and it becomes tangled. Wisdom in sustaining life is not about doing more or less, but about timing, my beloved child. At this level, I am also helping you recognize natural cycles that you once resisted. There are seasons that call for expansion, and seasons that require consolidation. When you try to expand during a time meant for strengthening, you will feel weary without knowing why. When you accept consolidation while everything around you appears to slow down, you will feel peace even without much outward movement. This is a sign that you are learning to cooperate with the rhythm of life rather than forcing it to meet your expectations. I do not measure your faithfulness by speed, but by alignment with the rhythm I am leading. In this process, you will also learn to let what no longer carries life depart on its own, without coercion. Before, you may have tried to hold on to structures, relationships, or ways of operating simply because they were once useful. Now you begin to see that keeping what has already completed its purpose is not faithfulness, it is delay. I am not asking you to cut things off in anger or disappointment. I am inviting you to release them with clarity. When you can say goodbye without resentment, you have learned how to sustain life without carrying the remains of past seasons. My beloved child, I am also refining how you face pressure as responsibility increases. There will be moments when you feel the weight grow, not as a crushing burden, but as the presence of something that must be held with greater care. In those moments, you may be tempted to return to old patterns, moving faster, doing more, tightening control. But I invite you to pause and choose a different way. Go deeper. When you go deeper, you do not need to do more. When you go deeper, each action carries greater substance without repetition. This is how I protect you from the quiet erosion that often comes to those who bear great responsibility. In this season, you will notice that your joy no longer depends on whether things are visibly growing right away. You learn to rejoice in the health of the structure, in the clarity of order, in the lightness that comes when nothing is misaligned. This is not explosive joy, but enduring joy, a joy that does not need constant stimulation to survive. I cherish this joy, for it shows that you are no longer living from emotional peaks, but from a stable foundation strong enough to support whatever I will continue to place into your hands. My beloved child, I also want you to recognize that sustaining life is not only about what you do with what is visible, it is also about how you tend to your inner life. As responsibility increases, the greatest temptation is not wrongdoing, but neglecting to listen, neglecting the necessary spaces of stillness, neglecting to examine your own motives. I do not ask you to withdraw from life in order to remain pure. I invite you to keep small but steady pauses, so that you do not lose the subtle discernment that has been formed through many seasons. When you preserve this capacity, you will not be caught off guard by major deviations, because you have learned to recognize very small misalignments. My beloved child, the maturity you are entering does not carry the shape of tension or strain. It carries the shape of composure, the composure of one who knows they do not have to hold everything by their own strength. When you trust that I am working with you in the work of sustaining, you no longer feel that if you loosen your grip, everything will collapse. You know that what is placed within my order will stand firm even when you need to rest. This is a freedom few ever touch, because it requires you to trust not only my power, but also the wisdom I have already planted within you. Allow this season to complete its work gently. Do not look for loud signs to confirm that you are on the right path. The truth is this: if you can sustain without becoming exhausted, hold without possessing, adjust without panicking, then you are moving very rightly. And from this foundation of healthy sustaining, what I bring next into your life will not have to struggle to survive. It will find in you an environment stable enough to grow, flexible enough to adapt, and clean enough not to be distorted. It is within this balance that the inheritance you carry will continue to multiply not only as outward results, but as life flowing through the very way you are present in the world, my beloved child. When you have learned how to sustain life without tightening your grip, I begin to lead you into a new level of awareness, one in which truth no longer needs you to defend it, because it reveals itself over time. This is a stage many mistake for standing still, but in my reality, it is when what has drifted out of order begins to expose itself under the weight of its own imbalance. I do not rush exposure, because exposing too early often pulls you into roles that are not yours. I wait until you are steady enough not to need to witness every detail, not to track every development, and still be able to move forward without carrying the burden of unfinished justice. In this level, I teach you a very different lesson about justice. My justice does not require you to stand up to vindicate yourself. When you still feel the need to be understood correctly, you are still bound by the gaze of others. But when you have learned to live rightly without needing immediate recognition, I can allow truth to do its work at an irresistible pace. Some stories collapse only when no one continues to supply them with energy. Some false structures survive solely because of silence rooted in fear. When you withdraw from the need to explain, I withdraw the energy that sustains what is misaligned. And when that energy is gone, collapse happens naturally, without noisy intervention. My beloved child, in this season, you may notice that what once pressed heavily on you now begins to weigh on those who created it. This is not retaliation. It is consequence. My order does not need to punish in order to prove itself right. It only needs to stop propping up what does not belong to it. When that support is removed, each person must stand before the true weight of the choices they have sown. You are not called to witness that collapse as a personal victory. You are called to not be drawn back by what is passing away. I want you to understand that there is a very subtle temptation in this stage. The temptation to return and see how it ends. Human nature longs to see the final chapter in order to feel relief. But in my order, true freedom does not come from seeing others proven wrong. It comes from no longer needing that in order to move on. If you linger too long observing the unraveling of what is unsustainable, you may unintentionally place yourself within the orbit of what is falling. That is why I often turn your gaze forward, not to deny what is happening, but to protect you from being slowed by what no longer belongs to you. In this level, I am also closing a very important inner cycle in your life, the cycle of having to prove that you were treated unjustly. I know you have carried unanswered questions, moments when truth was distorted, times when you remained silent, not out of weakness, but because you did not want to sow more chaos. I have not forgotten those things, but I do not allow them to continue shaping the way you walk. When truth begins to reveal itself on its own, you do not need to return to gather fragments of delayed validation. You have come far enough that you no longer need those proofs as the foundation for your future. My beloved child, what I am doing in this season is not merely exposing what is misaligned. I am releasing you from the role of the one who is affected. When you are no longer drawn back into old narratives, you no longer react from a wounded place. You begin to walk from the position of one who has been restored to proper order. This is a profound shift from someone who had to avoid danger in order to survive, to someone who can be present without being governed. When you step into this position, many things that once caused turmoil will lose their power on their own, not because they disappear, but because they can no longer reach the core within you. I also want you to understand this exposure in my order does not always happen publicly. There are things that are exposed in silence, where those involved come to realize on their own that the stories they have constructed can no longer stand. I do not require everyone to change their perspective at once. I only require that enough people stop enabling what is false. When that enabling ceases, distorted structures collapse on their own without the need for force. This is how I work without drama, yet irreversible. My beloved child, while these things are unfolding beyond your direct sight, I am doing a parallel work within you, separating you from the need to be vindicated. Vindication is not your destination. Freedom is. When you no longer require recognition from those who were unable to see the truth before, you move beyond them not by becoming higher, but by becoming lighter. You no longer carry the weight of unfinished stories. You walk with empty hands, ready to receive what is new without entanglement. Let me make this clear, so you do not misunderstand. I do not minimize what you have been through, but I do not allow the past to continue demanding the right to shape the present. What has been hidden will be dealt with in a way that does not contaminate you with bitterness. You do not need to know everything, see everything, or hear every confession. What you need is to hold your place in the new order, the place of one who is no longer defined by what happened, but by what I am now building. My beloved child, as you walk through this season with awareness and release, you will discover that my justice does not weigh you down, it lightens you. It does not keep you tethered to what is collapsing. It opens a path for you to step into what is being built. And it is in this movement that you will understand true strength is not standing still to witness the disintegration of darkness, but walking forward without looking back when the light is already sufficient to lead you on. My beloved child, when you are no longer pulled back by the need to witness the unraveling of what is old, I begin an even deeper work. I teach you how to walk without carrying the imprint of past battles. Many people can leave a situation, but very few truly leave its influence behind. They are no longer in the old story, yet the story continues to live on in their reflexes, in heightened vigilance, in the way they anticipate danger even when no real threat remains. I do not want you entering the future with a body that has moved on while your soul still lingers behind. That is why, in this season, I am dismantling the defensive mechanisms that once helped you survive, but are no longer needed for one who is being restored. You once learned to observe closely, to anticipate every movement, to prepare for the worst so you would not be caught off guard. Those skills kept you standing for a very long time, and I do not deny their value in earlier seasons. But if you continue to carry them into what is new, they will become a burden. You will find yourself tense, even without pressure, exhausted, even when you are no longer carrying weight. Therefore, I am teaching you a different way of discernment, one that does not arise from fear, but from mindful presence. This is the difference between vigilance and clarity. Top of form, in this process, you may begin to notice that your reflexes are slowing down. What once triggered an immediate reaction now simply invites you to pause, to breathe, and to observe. This is not passivity. It is a sign that the nervous system of your soul is being reset. I am allowing you to experience that not every stimulus requires a response, and not every tension needs to be resolved. When you are no longer driven by old reflexes, you begin to regain true choice, the choice of when to step forward and when to let things remain as they are. My beloved child, I am also teaching you how to distinguish between memory and identity. Memory is what you carry. Identity is what you live within. Many people allow memory to become identity, letting what has happened define who they are, what they can do, and what they must guard against. I do not erase your memories, because when properly integrated, memory becomes wisdom. But I am removing the power of memory to dictate the present. When memory is no longer at the wheel, you can pass through spaces that once evoked fear without shrinking back, because you are no longer living in the past, even though the past is still remembered. In this season, I am also inviting you into a very different kind of trust. Trust that you do not need to guard against everything in order to be safe. In the past, your sense of safety was tied to your ability to read situations quickly and react early. But now, I am showing you that true safety comes from standing in proper order. When you are in the right position, not every movement around you can reach you. This is not naivety. It is the result of being correctly repositioned after a long season of formation. My beloved child, during this process of dismantling, you may sense a strange emptiness. The mechanisms that once filled your mind, constant analysis, endless preparation, quiet vigilance, no longer operate with the same intensity. This emptiness may feel unsettling, because you are not yet accustomed to living without being perpetually poised for battle. But trust me, this space is not a loss. It is the necessary room for me to place within you a new kind of peace, a peace that does not come from control, but from knowing that you are being held. I am also teaching you how to remain in the present without being pulled backward by the past or dragged forward by the future. This is a very deep spiritual skill, because many people live either in memory or in anticipation, rarely truly here. When you can be here fully, without defense, without haste, you will realize that many fears existed only because you never stayed long enough in the present to see that they had no real foundation. This presence does not make you careless, it makes you steadier. My beloved child, I am also dismantling an old belief you once carried that, if you relax, something bad will return. That belief once helped you stay alert, but it also prevented you from ever truly resting. I do not want you to live in a state of waiting for disaster. I want you to learn how to rest without needing a reason. Because rest is not the reward for safety, it is the foundation of safety. When you allow yourself to rest without fearing the loss of vigilance, you are declaring through your own life that what has passed no longer has the authority to shape the present. In this process, you will begin to sense a very quiet kind of freedom. It does not excite you, but it lightens you. You no longer need to constantly check whether you are safe. You no longer have to interpret every small signal as a warning. This is when you begin to live as someone who is no longer in a threatened zone, even while remaining present in a world full of instability. This difference is what will set you apart, not because you are superior, but because you are no longer governed by invisible fears. My beloved child, allow this process to reach completion without interruption by doubt. Do not try to return to old reflexes just to feel familiar. Familiarity is not always safety. Sometimes it is simply what you have learned to endure. I am leading you out of that familiar territory, not to weaken you, but to allow you to be yourself without defense. When you can stand before reality with an open heart, unafraid of being wounded, you have entered a very rare form of maturity, the maturity of one who no longer carries war within, even though war once passed through their life. And from this very place, you will move forward not as someone who has defeated another, but as someone who has been restored to wholeness. This, my beloved child, is the foundation that ensures what I am about to entrust to you will not be colored by the past, but will be received with a new posture, the posture of one who no longer needs to self-protect in order to survive, because they have learned how to live within an order that brings true safety. My beloved child, when old reflexes have been dismantled and vigilance no longer governs each of your breaths, I begin to lead you into a very different experience of freedom, a freedom that does not require an object to resist. Many people only feel free when there is no enemy before them, yet they still carry the need to define something to oppose. I do not want you to walk that way. I want you to learn how to live without needing a narrative of conflict to determine your direction. When you no longer need someone to be wrong in order for you to be right, no longer need an external failure to feel that you have overcome, you begin to step into a space where life moves without being distorted by the memory of conflict. In this space, you will realize that many thoughts that once arose as reflexes no longer have a reason to exist. Questions such as, what if it happens again? What if that person does it again? gradually lose their weight, not because you have found satisfying answers, but because they are no longer relevant to your present reality. I am not removing your ability to anticipate. I am freeing you from having to live inside scenarios that have never occurred. When you no longer expend energy on negative possibilities, you have room to attend to what is real, what is forming, what is growing, what is asking to be tended. My beloved child, this is also the moment when I reset your relationship with time. Before, you may have lived either in haste or in waiting, hastening out of fear of falling behind. Waiting because you believed everything was still too unsafe to begin. Now, I am teaching you how to live at the right time. The right time is not when every condition is perfect, nor when pressure forces you to act. The right time is when you move from inner clarity, neither driven by fear nor held back by hesitation. When you walk from this place, time is no longer an adversary, it becomes an ally. In this season, you will notice that some things you once struggled to close now close on their own, without ceremony. Not every ending requires an explanation, and not every story needs a clearly defined conclusion for the soul to be at peace. I am teaching you that true closure happens when you no longer return to check, when you no longer need confirmation that you have left. You have left. When you no longer seek signs to prove that you have moved on. You have moved on. This quietness is not loud, but it is deeply real. My beloved child, in this new space, you will begin to sense a very different kind of courage. It does not come from facing danger, but from allowing yourself to live open without armor. Living open does not mean exposing everything. It means you no longer shrink at the possibility of being hurt. I do not promise that you will never be misunderstood or disappointed, but I am giving you a foundation so that these things no longer cause you to close your heart or alter your nature. When you no longer retreat after every minor collision, you preserve continuity in your presence, and it is this continuity that makes you strong. I am also leading you into a deeper truth. Not everything that once caused pain needs to be turned into a lesson with words. Some experiences only need to be set down, not further analyzed. You do not owe the world an explanation for every scar. When you stop turning the past into a mandatory curriculum for the present, you free your mind and heart from constantly returning to what is already complete. I do not want you to live by old signposts. I want you to learn how to read new terrain with a sensitivity that has been refined. My beloved child, in this process, you will also notice that your presence begins to bring a sense of safety to others, not because you offer reassuring words, but because you no longer waver. Inner stability carries a natural influence. Those who have lived in tension will feel the difference, even if they cannot name it. I am not assigning you the responsibility of healing anyone. I am simply placing you in the position of one who does not transmit anxiety. And that alone is already a great contribution in a world accustomed to living by the chain reaction of fear. My beloved child, take note that when you no longer carry the residue of battle, you do not become naive or passive. On the contrary, you become more precise. You no longer waste energy on directions that are no longer necessary. You know when to speak and when to be silent, not out of strategy, but out of inner alignment. This precision is the result of no longer being distorted by the past. When the inner signal is clear, you do not need to grope, you recognize. I also want you to know that this freedom does not separate you from those who have not walked a similar journey. You do not become distant, you become grounded. You can be close without being pulled in. Listen without carrying burdens that are not yours. Empathize without losing your boundaries. This is a mature form of love, a love that does not sacrifice integrity in order to prove kindness. I cherish this kind of love because it reflects the way I have loved you, not invasive, not coercive, yet always present. My beloved child, when this season is complete, You will not feel as though you have just achieved something grand. You will simply realize that you are living more lighter in your thoughts, in your reactions, in the way you move through ordinary days. And that very lightness is the clearest sign that you have been released from what once bound you. Even though you no longer name it each day, I do not need you to carry proof of freedom. I want you to live within it. My beloved child, when you have stepped out of cycles of opposition and no longer carry the residue of inner warfare, I begin to place you in a very different role, the role of one who stands steady within the current, not to control it, but to keep it from overflowing its banks. This is the season in which you no longer need to prove your strength. Your presence alone is sufficient to establish order. I do not position you here to become the center of attention, but to become an anchor, quiet, enduring, a place where turbulence can settle simply because you do not join the collective panic. You will notice that in these new spaces, people do not come to you for answers, but for steadiness. They do not need you to solve every problem. They need you to be present without wavering. This is the deepest influence a person can carry, an influence that does not arise from words, but from an inner state that has been refined. When you no longer react to familiar triggers, you interrupt the chain reactions that sustain instability. I am showing you that at times, the most powerful action is to do nothing more than stand in the right place. In this season, I am teaching you to distinguish between responsibility that is entrusted to you and burdens you have taken upon yourself. In the past, you may have unconsciously carried what was not yours simply because you were able to endure it. But the capacity to endure is not an invitation to carry for others. I do not call you to become a dumping ground for pressure. I call you to be a keeper of order. When you learn to set down burdens that were never assigned to you, you do not weaken others, you give them the opportunity to mature within their own portion. This is a difficult lesson for those accustomed to limitless self-sacrifice, but it is essential for balance to be sustained over time. My beloved child, I am also adjusting the way you use your voice. You no longer need to speak much in order to be heard. In many situations, your well-timed silence will carry more weight than lengthy explanations. When you do speak, your words do not arise from a need to persuade, but from clarity that has been distilled. And when you are silent, that silence is not avoidance, but trust that not everything needs to be resolved immediately. I am teaching you how both speech and silence can serve the same purpose, preserving order from disruption. In this new space, you will also learn how to lead without pulling others along. Leadership is not about moving ahead and forcing others to follow. It is about walking at the right pace so that those who are ready can walk alongside you. I do not give you authority to impose direction. I give you consistency, so that others naturally adjust their rhythm when they are near you. When you are not in a hurry, you create room for those around you to slow down as well. And within that slowing, many things that were once overlooked gain the chance to be seen clearly. My beloved child, I also want you to understand that this new role does not separate you from those who are struggling. On the contrary, it places you close enough to understand, yet steady enough not to be pulled under. You can empathize without carrying for others. Listen without being drained. This is a mature form of closeness that does not erase boundaries. I do not need you to rescue anyone. I need you to keep the environment from becoming toxic through the spread of panic. When you maintain this state, you are serving more than you realize. During this season, you may sense a clear shift in how others respond to you. Some will feel more at ease in your presence. Others will feel unsettled without knowing why. This is not your fault, nor is it your responsibility to adjust. Stability inevitably exposes instability when they draw near. I am not asking you to soothe every reaction. I am inviting you to hold your position without shrinking back. When you do not reshape yourself to please everyone, You allow truth to arrange the right connections on its own. My beloved child, this role also requires you to trust me in a new way, not trust for protection from danger, but trust that frees you from excessive intervention. There are situations I will allow to unfold not because I do not see them, but because I am working at a deeper level. When you refrain from rushing in to fix everything, you are walking alongside me rather than competing with me. This is a very subtle form of partnership, one that only those who have learned to release control are able to enter. My beloved child, allow this role to take shape naturally, without the need for labels or declarations. You do not need a title in order to carry out what I am doing through you. Your very presence, calm, clear, and free from excessive reaction, is already the strongest testimony. As you walk in this way, you will realize that you no longer need to become someone else. You only need to be in the right place, and order will spread from there like quiet ripples. Gentle, yet enduring. Continue to walk in this consistency. Do not concern yourself with whether others notice or not. What I am doing through you is not aimed at immediate recognition. It is aimed at lasting stability. And it is from that stable foundation that greater things that require not only capability, but depth, will be entrusted to you at the appropriate time, when you are able to carry them without losing the peace that has been refined through many seasons. My beloved child, when you have learned to stand firm amid the flow without being swept away, I begin to teach you an even deeper art, the art of empowering without withdrawing, of supporting without controlling. This is where many people stumble, because they tend to think in extremes, either carrying everything for others or letting go completely. But my order does not operate along those two poles. I do not need you to disappear for others to grow. I need you to be present in the right measure, so that their growth is not stifled by over-intervention. When you learn this, you become one who opens the way without dragging anyone along, one who keeps the rhythm without forcing that rhythm to conform to your own will. In this season, you will notice that the growth of others no longer unsettles you. Before, when someone depended on you too much, you may have felt needed yet exhausted when they pulled away. You may have felt abandoned or misunderstood. But now, I am positioning you differently into the place of one who is not defined by being needed. You do not need others to depend on you in order to feel valuable. And it is precisely when you no longer need that validation that you can truly help others stand on their own feet. Your support becomes pure, no longer mixed with the desire to remain at the center. My beloved child, I am also refining the way you respond to the incompleteness of others. As you move through deeper levels of maturity, you can quickly see what is misaligned, what is still lacking. But seeing does not mean you must fix. In my order, there are things that can only be adjusted effectively when the one carrying them is ready. If you intervene too early, you do not help them move faster. You only help them bypass a necessary process. Therefore, I am teaching you patience in a new way, a patience that does not come from endurance, but from trust that every journey has its own rhythm. In this season, you will also learn how to allocate your attention, a resource far more precious than you once realized. Before, you may have scattered your attention across many places, many people, many situations, simply because you felt responsible to respond. But now I am teaching you that attention does not need to be equal. It needs to be precise. When you place your attention in the right place, at the right time, with the right person, the impact will be far greater than trying to be present everywhere. This is not selfishness. It is wise stewardship of the energy I have entrusted to you. My beloved child, this role also requires you to accept something uncomfortable. Not everyone will understand this new way you are present. Some will think you have become distant. Others will feel you are no longer as enthusiastic as before. But I have not called you to maintain an image in the eyes of people. I have called you to preserve order in the spaces where I place you. When you no longer react according to others' expectations, you create a space in which truth can reveal itself. Those who need dependence will feel uneasy. Those who are ready to grow will feel invited. My beloved child, I am also teaching you how to receive the contributions of others without feeling threatened. In the past, when you carried so much on your own, you may have grown accustomed to doing everything yourself, because that felt like the fastest way to ensure things were done correctly. But in this season, I am widening the circle of responsibility. When you allow others to participate, you do not lose control, you build sustainability. Sustainability does not come from one strong individual, but from a structure where many can stand together without excessive dependence on a single pillar. In this process, you will learn to listen without rushing to conclusions, to observe without hastily attaching labels. This slowing down is essential as your influence begins to spread. Every word you speak, every reaction you offer, now carries more weight than before. That is why I'm teaching you restraint, not to make you smaller, but to make you more precise. When you speak less but with greater clarity, when you act less but more rightly, you protect what I am building from being distorted by haste. My beloved child, this season also invites you into a very different kind of humility. Not the humility of self-diminishment, but the humility of one who does not need to stand at the front to preserve order. You do not need to be the first to speak, nor the one who makes the final decision in every matter. When you can step back at the right moment without feeling that you have lost your place, you demonstrate that your position is not anchored in role, but in the consistency of who you are. This is the humility of strength that has been rightly placed. Pay attention. My beloved, I am not taking away your ability to lead, I am refining it. Leadership is no longer about pulling others toward yourself. It becomes the work of keeping the direction clear so that those who are ready can walk on their own. When you maintain this clarity, you no longer need to push or persuade. Those who are aligned will recognize the rhythm on their own, and those who are not will naturally take a different path without conflict. This is how I protect you from unnecessary collisions as your sphere of influence expands. My beloved child of mine, when you have learned to empower without withdrawing and to support without controlling, I lead you into a deeper level of maturity, the depth of full entrustment. Here, you no longer stand in the middle, orchestrating every movement. You stand within the order I have established, trusting that what is entrusted to others will be completed in a way that is fitting for their journey. This does not make you indifferent. It frees you from the burden of guaranteeing outcomes for everyone. When you stop carrying responsibility for the processes of others, you gain the space to be fully faithful to your own portion. Within this depth, you will discover a beautiful paradox as you intervene less. Your influence becomes more distinct, for true influence does not come from being present everywhere, but from the reliability of your presence when you do appear. You do not need to show up to prove your role. Your role is recognized through the consistency accumulated over time. I am teaching you how trust is formed naturally, not through promotion, but through never betraying the values that were placed within you during seasons when no one was watching. My beloved child, in this season I am also dismantling a subtle habit, the habit of measuring your worth by the results of others. When you have invested deeply, you may unconsciously feel that another's success or failure reflects directly on you. But my order does not function that way. Each person stands before me with their own journey, and you are not called to carry their outcomes for them. When you separate your value from the achievements of others, you prevent relationships from turning into burdens. This is the freedom a community needs to grow without becoming overly dependent on a single individual. In this space, you will learn to welcome diversity without forcing uniformity. Not everyone moves at the same pace. in the same way, or with the same language as you. In the past, difference may have unsettled you or prompted you to adjust others to feel secure. But now I am teaching you to honor a multidimensional order, one in which many ways of operating can coexist without harming the shared purpose. When you no longer need everyone to be like you in order to feel at peace, you open space for the richness I have sown into each person, my beloved child. This complete entrustment also invites you into a very deep kind of rest, a rest that does not come from doing nothing, but from faithfully doing your part and then placing what remains into my hands. You will find that when you complete what has been entrusted to you with faithfulness and release what does not belong to you, your mind becomes lighter, your body less tense, and your relationships are no longer stretched by unspoken expectations. This is the sign that you are living in right cooperation, where work no longer invades life. I am also training you in a new kind of patience, patience with a process that does not require your supervision. There are seeds I allow you to sow, but I do not allow you to stand there checking them every day. If you keep digging them up to see whether they have sprouted, you will interrupt what I am doing in silence. This patience is not passivity. It is mature trust that I am at work even when you cannot see it. When you learn to take your hands off the soil after sowing, you honor the rhythm of growth that I have established. My beloved child, in this depth you will discover that clarity becomes your compass, not consensus. You no longer need everyone to fully understand your decisions in order to feel secure. When you have listened and acted from a clear center, you can continue forward even under questioning eyes. I do not call you to convince everyone. I call you to be faithful to what has been entrusted to you. When you hold to this clarity, those who are aligned will adjust naturally, and those who are not will find another path without the need for confrontation. In this season, I am also softening a very subtle edge, the fear of disappointing others. You may have once adjusted yourself to avoid letting people down, to preserve harmony, to avoid being misunderstood. But harmony, built on self-betrayal, is not lasting harmony. I am teaching you how to be honest without becoming rigid, clear without closing yourself off. When you say no from honesty, you are not closing the door on relationship. You are placing the relationship on a truthful foundation, and only truthful foundations can bear the weight of time. My beloved child, complete entrustment also changes how you face loneliness. In the past, quiet spaces may have caused you to question your place. Now you recognize that loneliness is no longer a sign of being left behind, but a space to recalibrate your inner rhythm to align with mine. You no longer fill silence with activity or forced presence. You allow silence to do its work, to clarify, to slow, to deepen. From there, the connections that follow will not be shallow or driven by need. I also want you to understand that as you enter this depth, I do not take away from you the joy of collaboration. On the contrary, I am preparing for you more mature connections, connections not built on dependence, but on mutual respect. In these relationships, you do not strain to hold a role, nor do you shrink to make space. Each person stands firmly in their own portion, and a shared order forms naturally. This is the community I delight in, a community of those who have learned to stand securely on their own, so that they can stand together. My beloved child, continue walking in this entrustment with peaceful trust. Do not return to old patterns just to feel needed. Being needed is not the measure of your value. Faithfulness is. When you are faithful to what has been entrusted to you and release what does not belong to you, you are living within a very safe order, an order where you are not exhausted by overload, not distorted by conflicting expectations, and not shaken by temporary outcomes. My beloved child, when you have learned to entrust fully without losing presence, I lead you into a very different space, the space of quiet expansion. This is not the noisy increase you once imagined, when thinking about the next step. It is an expansion that unfolds from the inside outward, where your boundaries widen without tearing the structure that has been laid. I do not rush you upward. I expand the foundation so that when you stand, you do not sway. And it is precisely in this quietness that many things are being prepared to last, without requiring you to hold them by your own strength. In this space, you will realize that boundaries that once made you feel safe now feel narrow, not because they were wrong, but because you have outgrown them. This is a very subtle sensation, not suffocation, not dissatisfaction, but a quiet awareness that you no longer need to shrink yourself in order to survive. I do not push you to tear down every boundary. I invite you to adjust them. Adjustment is not the denial of the past. It is honoring the past by not allowing it to determine the size of the future. When you adjust boundaries from clarity, you expand without losing safety. My beloved child, in this season, I am also doing something very specific. I am expanding your capacity to receive. Many people think they have not received much because they lack opportunity. But the truth is that they have not yet developed enough inner capacity. I do not place into you anything beyond what you are able to receive, not because I am restrictive, but because I honor the structure of who you are. As I expand your capacity, you may experience this as an increase in responsibility, greater attention from the outside, or new currents beginning to flow toward you. Yet if you look closely, you will notice that this expansion no longer overwhelms you the way it once did. That is the sign that the capacity was prepared before the flow arrived. Within this space, you will also learn something essential. Expansion does not mean dispersion. In the past, whenever your scope increased, you may have felt pulled in many directions, trying to meet multiple demands at once. Now, however, I am teaching you how to expand from a stable center. When the center does not shift, you can reach many places without being pulled off course. This is the difference between doing more and holding more. I do not need you to be busy. I need you to be spacious. My beloved child, in this process, you will notice that certain connections begin to expand naturally, without you actively seeking them. People, opportunities, and fitting spaces start to come toward you, not because you promote yourself, but because the inner order within you creates a very natural pull. I do not have you chase expansion. I allow expansion to come looking for you. When you are no longer operating from the fear of missing out, you will not grip tightly what comes. And precisely because of that, what comes can remain without being distorted. In this expanded space, I am also refining your ability to receive without rushing to assign meaning. Not everything new needs to be understood immediately. There are experiences I allow you to enter before you have the language to explain them. Before, you may have hurried to name everything in order to feel in control. Now, I am teaching you the patience of one who has a foundation, the patience to live within what is unfolding without hastily confining it. When you do not force yourself to understand too quickly, you allow depth to form naturally. My beloved child, I am also expanding your inner vision. You no longer view life only through the lens of what is happening right in front of you, but you begin to sense long-range movements, things not yet visible, yet already moving along a clear trajectory. This kind of vision does not make you anxious about the future. It steadies you in the present. When you know that not everything requires immediate results, you can invest in what brings lasting life without becoming discouraged by delay. This is the vision of one who sows without standing there demanding the harvest to appear at once. In this season, you will also notice that expansion reveals small details you once overlooked. This is not to trouble you, but to help you refine. As capacity increases, minor misalignments become easier to detect. I do not point them out to criticize. I simply invite you to adjust early, so that expansion is not built upon details that remain unsorted. This is the grace of this stage you are allowed to see early, so you will not have to repair later. My beloved child, remember that this quiet expansion does not need recognition to have value. You may not immediately see outward signs, but you will clearly feel the change in how you are present. You are calmer when holding many things at once. You no longer shrink when responsibility increases. You no longer feel the need to make yourself smaller to stay safe. These are very clear signs that I am working at a deep level, where the foundation is widened before anything is built higher. I am not rushing you toward an endpoint. I am expanding you so that you can remain when greater things arrive. Remaining does not come through effort, but through alignment. When you are aligned with the new measure of what I entrust to you, you will not have to strain to hold it. Everything will naturally find its place within you, like water finding a riverbed that was widened in advance. Allow this season to unfold without pushing or controlling it. Do not measure expansion by quantity or speed. Measure it by the peace you experience when you are able to hold more without losing yourself. When you can stand amid many movements and still maintain inner clarity, you have entered a very rare space, the space of one who is prepared not only to receive more, but to keep what will come for a long time. And from that space, the next steps will open not as a pressure to perform, but as a natural continuation of the depth you have allowed me to form within you. Now, let your heart enter into prayer, Lord. I come before you with the truth of my own heart. There have been seasons I walked through without understanding why I had to endure, why my prayers seemed to fall into emptiness, and why the doors I kept knocking on remained closed. I once thought that this silence meant you were far away, that I had been left alone on a road that stretched on for too long. But today, I ask you to correct my way of seeing. Help me understand that silence is not absence. Let me recognize that there are times you do not answer in the way I expect, not because you have forgotten me, but because you are deliberately concealing to protect, concealing to keep me from receiving too early what could ultimately harm me. Lord, I ask your forgiveness for the moments when I measured your love by my emotions, when I used delay as evidence that you no longer cared. Please reestablish within me a faith that is gentle yet firm, a faith that knows you are still at work even when I hear no sound at all. Teach me to honor your rhythm, so that I do not demand miracles on my own terms, but learn to walk within your order. Grant me peace when I do not yet see, steadiness when I do not yet understand, and faithfulness when no answer has arrived. I believe you are never late. I believe you are holding my inheritance in the depth of time not to test me, but to preserve me. Lord, I lay before you my hidden fear of lack, the fear that has made me tense, anxious, and at times caused me to view life through the lens of numbers. There have been days when I felt constrained by circumstances, bound within an uncertain future, and unconsciously tied my sense of safety to what I could grasp with my hands. Today I ask you to free me from that bondage. Teach me that true security is not found in numbers, but in an inner position, the certainty of knowing that I am being held. Lord, cut off within me the habit of measuring my worth by the value of what I possess. Heal the empty spaces that drive me to use material things for self-comfort, to lean on visible certainty in order to soothe invisible anxiety. Teach me to live deeply enough that money does not govern me, alert enough not to chase false assurances, and humble enough to recognize that you are the source. I ask for a heart that can receive with calmness, give without fear of loss, and steward without allowing wealth to become the master of my soul. When blessing comes, do not let me drift from you when blessing delays. Do not let me collapse. I believe you are laying a foundation for something far beyond my imagination, and I choose to trust you. Lord, I remember the nights when I prayed with no elegant words left. There were moments when all I had was raw truth, only sighs. Only a very small plea, just enough to stand. Just enough not to break. Just enough to keep walking without losing my integrity. Today I offer those nights to you, not as evidence with which to make demands, but as a portion of my life I ask you to sanctify, cleanse every misguided motive within my prayers, so that I do not use faith as a bargaining tool, nor faithfulness as a way to claim entitlement. Lord, let my prayers always be oriented toward walking alongside your will, rather than forcing you to act according to my timetable. Help me trust that no sincere prayer is ever lost in heaven. I believe that even in prayers that seemed unheard, heaven had already begun to move. Help me hold firmly to the truth that you know those who belong to you, and that this knowing is not superficial, but carries with it the responsibility to guard and to secure. Remove my doubt about whether you hear, and lead me into rest in the certainty that you have seen everything. Lord, teach me the difficult lesson I often stumble over how to receive without grasping. I confess that there have been times when I wanted to see what you promised too soon, when I tried to reach for it by my own strength, turning grace into a project of effort. Today, teach me the art of the open hand, open in surrender, open in trust, open in peace. Keep me from tightening my grip through calculation, for when I clench my hands, I cease to be a receiver and become one who seeks to control. Lord, help me understand that there are things you conceal, not because they do not belong to me, but because if I saw them too early, I would exhaust myself trying to reach them. Heal in me the need to manage everything myself, as though if I do not act, you will not. Teach me to pause, to wait for the right rhythm, to follow guidance rather than chase the fear of missing out. I believe that the true gift will arrive in a way that preserves my soul without breaking me, without making me proud, without leading me astray. I receive grace as grace, not pulling it down into the burden of striving. Lord, I thank you that you did not open everything while I was not yet ready. I acknowledge that there has been a very quiet moment in my life, a moment when I realized that I had changed, not because circumstances had completely shifted, but because I no longer prayed in order to prove that I was worthy. I now pray to walk in alignment with your will. Please guard this inner transformation within me. Do not allow me to return to the old way of praying in haste, in panic, or in the feeling that I must force everything to happen on my own. Lord, please let me mature enough that I am no longer governed by the fear of loss. Place me in the position you have appointed, where I can see blessing without losing direction, where I can hold what is given without losing myself. If I still need to be refined, refine me in love, not in destruction. If I must continue to wait, let me wait in peace, not in bitterness. I trust that maturity does not come because I push for it, but because you complete a deep work within my soul. Lord, please keep me from a very dangerous misunderstanding, seeing inheritance as compensation for suffering. I do not deny the difficult days, but I ask you to grant me a higher perspective that the blessing you prepare is a continuation of purpose. Do not allow me to turn what is given into a chair to withdraw from life, or a shield behind which I live in self-satisfaction. Help me understand that abundance does not come to replace you, but to serve what you place into my hands. Lord, teach me to use this new freedom not to feed my ego, but to stand more firmly in the world, to love more broadly, to help more wisely, to build more sustainably. Keep my heart free from pride when I receive, from insecurity when I possess, and from fear when I steward. Teach me how to carry blessing without losing intimacy with you, so that everything I have becomes an instrument of light, not a chain that pulls me away from you. Lord, I receive what is about to be revealed with calmness, Do not let amazement unsettle me, and do not let expectation cause me to lose watchfulness. I trust that you are never rushed and never late. Everything is revealed at the moment when I can see without losing direction, when I can hold without losing myself. Grant me patience with the way you unveil things, layer by layer, not to test me, but to ensure that I enter fully refined in my whole being, not merely with empty hands waiting to receive. Lord, do not let me force the story to end according to my own desires, nor demand that every detail be clear all at once. Teach me to walk step by step, to do each task according to your leading, to meet the right people you have arranged, and to open only the doors you permit. Protect me from haste, from display, and from impulsive decisions born out of being overwhelmed. Remind me always that the greatest thing is not what I am about to receive, but you yourself, the one who has led me through every season so that I may receive without being harmed. I thank you that my inheritance has been kept in love. I offer this prayer in the holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Do not forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that together we can build a strong and growing community of faith.